watching All 24 News World News Program. Next up are the headlines. Algerian forces have taken out 3 armed smugglers of Moroccan nationality and arrested the 4th, vowing to protect the country's security. Two people were killed in Gaza by occupation forces in Khan Yunis. Health officials are calling for pressure to allow patient evacuations. Meanwhile, international calls push for more aid and an end to the attacks. Also in our news tonight, amid rising Western pressure, Iran vows a tough response to any attack. A top diplomat is now heading to Turkey for talks, following a new EU sanctions announcement. In Sudan, deaths and injuries are reported after RSF forces shell drilling. The army says it has secured the city, while the European Union sanctions top RSF commanders. Welcome back. Leading on news tonight, Algeria's Ministry of National Defense says joint units of the People's National Army, border guards and customs have neutralized 3 armed smugglers of Moroccan nationality and arrested the 4th. The operation followed an ambush Wednesday evening in the Gnama area of Bashar province in the 3rd military region. According to the ministry, the group was trying to exploit severe weather conditions to carry out criminal activity. Security forces also seized 4 kilograms of processed cannabis, a hunting rifle, binoculars for mobile phones, and other equipment. In a similar note, the Algerian army units have seized 447 kilograms of processed cannabis in the Gnama area of Bashar province within the 3rd military region. The Ministry of National Defense says the haul comes as part of the follow-up to Wednesday's operation in the same area, with additional quantities found at several locations. The ministry says the seizure confirms the criminal groups intend to flood the country with drugs. Hamza Shakhloufa, director of the consortium carrying out the Western Mining Line project for Algeria's Consider Group, says the project highlights the competence of Algerian companies. Speaking to All 24 News, he said Consider, a leading firm in construction and public works, carried out more than 26 million cubic meters of excavation and laid 250 kilometers of railway track.
Consider Company is one of the leading and vital companies in this project, having contributed to over 26 million cubic meters of excavation, backfilling and leveling operations. Regarding technical structures, Consider completed more than 16 such structures, including bridges, overpasses and underpasses. Concerning the railway installation, Consider laid over 150 kilometers of track, representing approximately 30% of the strategic Western Mining Line project.
Still with Algeria's related news, the Algerian Justice Minister Lotfi Boujama met with Ségolène Royal, the head of the France-Algeria Association in Algiers on Thursday. The meeting, held at her request, followed Royal's public plea to visit French national Christophe Guise, who is currently detained in Algeria. Minister Boujama granted the authorization. Royal confirmed she will visit Guise at his correctional facility on Friday. The French National Assembly has passed a bill to expand compensation for victims of French nuclear testing. A key amendment requires the government to issue a report within 6 months detailing France's historical nuclear tests in Algeria. The amendment notes France has made no real effort until now to uncover the truth about its nuclear tests in the Algerian Sahara. The president of the Algeria-France Association, Ségolène Royal, has stressed that despite the difficult moment Algerian and French relations are going through, there is always opportunities to restore the historic friendship ties uniting the two countries and peoples. In an interview with All 24 News Channel, Royal underlined that both France and Algeria have the duty to unlock creative energy for the benefit of the two countries' youths.
C'est un moment difficile, mais je pense qu'il y a des opportunités.
It's a difficult time, but I think that there are opportunities to restore the bonds of friendship between the Algerian and French peoples, to find avenues for easing tensions, to manage to turn the page of division, as stated by President Tebboune, and to unlock creative energy for the youth of both shores, because ultimately we have a common heritage, which is the Mediterranean. This common heritage obliges us to get along together despite the difficulties of the past history. We have to make gestures of acknowledgement for what happened, because it is on this basis, on the basis of never again, of this clear acknowledgement by France, that we could build fruitful relations between the two shores.
De cette reconnaissance claire par la France, que nous pourrons ensuite construire des relations fructueuses entre les deux rives.
Royal evokes France's nuclear tests in the Algerian Sahara, urging the opening of archives, scientific study, territory decontamination, public information, and victim compensation.
Les conséquences des effets nucléaires, en effet, ont eu...
The consequences of nuclear tests have inevitable effects on health, not only on those who carried them out, because the French who conducted these nuclear tests have often been exposed to radiation, and so have been the local populations, of course. Therefore, it is imperative to open the archives, examine what was done, and conduct further scientific studies, both to decontaminate the territory where possible, and to inform the populations where there are risks, and to compensate the victims. I know that the National Assembly has taken up a bill on nuclear tests in Polynesia, but it went less far on the issue of tests in the Algerian Sahara. But perhaps they have heard, as I have been demanding this since the trip, which had a great impact. An amendment has been adopted regarding the nuclear test in the Algerian Sahara, compelling the government to produce, with a 6-month period, a complete report on these nuclear tests. It's progressing well, and I'm happy, and I will closely follow the drafting of this report.
La rédaction de ce rapport.
The Algerian Chamber of Commerce and Industry hosted Ségolène Royal, president of the France-Algeria Association in Algiers, on Thursday. Chamber officials, including President Tayyip Shabab and Director General Guidri Shakib Ismail, met with Royal to discuss boosting trade and economic cooperation, exploring joint investment opportunities, and strengthening partnerships across key sectors. And in the Gaza file tonight, 2 Palestinians have been killed by Zionist occupation forces in Khan Yunis since the southern part of the Strip. Local sources say 1 man was shot Thursday in a Sheikh Nasser neighborhood. A second victim was pronounced dead after being brought to the Nasser medical complex after being shot outside of the occupation-controlled zones in the city. The Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza says over 20,000 patients are waiting for medical treatment abroad, including 4,400 or 500 children, 4,000 cancer patients, and 6,000 wounded. 400 of them are in critical condition. Zahar al-Wahidi, head of Gaza's Health Information Center, says the ongoing closure of the Rafah crossing by the Israeli occupation is costing lives. So far, 1,268 patients on the waiting list have died after being denied travel. He urged the international community to pressure the Zionist occupation to allow patient evacuations from Gaza. Humanitarian aid in Gaza remains fragile as airstrikes, shelling, and gunfire continue to claim civilian lives. The UN reports. Olga Sherevko, UN spokesperson in the occupied Palestinian territory, said Thursday that the crisis is not inevitable. Aid could save more lives if obstacles were removed and Zionist violations against Palestinians in the Strip stopped.
The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is not inevitable. Aid can save more lives, but only once the obstacles are resolved. On the ground, of course, there are airstrikes, shelling, and gunfire, which continue to kill and maim civilians. Cold weather is cruelly taking children's lives. Half of Gaza remains off limits, and most Palestinians are still displaced and are living in deplorable conditions. Urgently needed supplies, tools to repair homes, machinery to clear rubble, and spare parts remain restricted.
The United Nations is calling for a complete and unconditional to the illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories. A question it notes is affirmed by the International Court of Justice. In a social media post, UN Special Reporter Francesca Albanese stated that the Israeli occupation has no legal authority to block humanitarian organizations from entering Gaza and other occupied Palestinian territories. Eleven countries condemned the Israeli occupation's demolition of UNRWA's headquarters in Al-Quds. In a joint statement Wednesday, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Ireland, Japan, Norway, Portugal, Spain, and the UK called the move unacceptable and said it undermines humanitarian work. They urged an end to all demolitions and stressed that the occupation must respect UN premises under international law. Hamas urged the international community to turn condemnation into action, pressuring the Israeli occupation to allow UNRWA to resume its relief work for Palestinians enduring a humanitarian crisis. In a Wednesday statement, the movement praised the 11 countries that condemned the demolition of UNRWA's headquarters in Al-Quds and called on others to take similar stance to stop the occupation's attacks on the agency.
Hamas welcomes the condemnation by 9 European countries, Canada and Japan, of the occupation's arbitrary measures against the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, including the demolition of its offices in Al-Quds. These countries have called for ensuring the continuation of UNRWA's humanitarian aid to the Palestinian people in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Hamas urges these countries to translate their positions into practical pressure-driven steps against the occupation to guarantee the resumption of UNRWA's relief work for the Palestinian people. Furthermore, Hamas calls on other countries worldwide to adopt similar stances condemning the occupation's behavior, pressuring it to halt its actions and aggression against UNRWA, and enabling the agency to perform its humanitarian duties under the UN mandate without restrictions or coercion.
Talks between the leaders of Russia and Syria focus squarely on trade and the economy, according to the Kremlin. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed that Presidents Vladimir Putin and Ahmed Bashar did discuss Russian military bases in Syria, but stressed that expanding bilateral trade was a top priority. Peskov said Moscow and Damascus have what he called broad potential for economic cooperation and share mutual interests. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned Thursday that global challenges cannot be solved by a single power and said international law is being undermined as multilateral cooperation weakens. While Guterres did not name any country, his remarks come a week after President Donald Trump unveiled a board of peace initially to support Gaza's ceasefire, but which he suggested could play a wider global role, raising concerns among other nations.
This is an especially global problems will not be solved by one power calling the shots, nor will they be solved by two powers carving the world into rival spheres of influence. It is important to accelerate deliberately and with determination multipolarity, one that is networked, inclusive by design, and capable of creating balance through partnerships in trade, in technology, and in international cooperation.
Moving on to another topical development, but still in the Middle East. The U.S. is sending more firepower to the Middle East. On Thursday, the destroyer USS Delbert D. Black arrived, joining 6 destroyers already in the region, along with an aircraft carrier and 3 other combat ships. Washington says the move is to maintain security and keep a close watch on Y's intentions, showing it's ready to respond if needed. For its part, Iran's military is vowing a swift and overwhelming response to any attack. Army Commander Major General Amir Hatami announced the deployment of 1,000 new domestically made strategic drones to combat units. He says the move is a direct response to current threats and lessons learned from recent tensions. The general stated that maintaining the strategic advantage is essential for decisive retaliation. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says its forces are ready for any scenario, warning that any military action against Tehran is bound to fail. Spokesman Ali Mohammed Naini told state media Thursday that the 12-day war showed a confrontation with Iran is futile and that the Iranian armed forces will decide the outcome of any conflict. USS Delbert D. Black is currently heading towards Iran in preparation for a possible military operation against Iran. Negotiations between the two countries appear to have stalled, raising the fear of a second military escalation. Mohammed Khatta reports.
Amid rising tensions between Washington and Tehran, a large U.S. naval force is heading toward Iran.
And by the way, there's another beautiful armada floating beautifully toward Iran right now.
Moving with speed and force, according to Donald Trump's own depiction of the deployment. More alarming, the U.S. president is signaling the possibility of a more severe attack than the 2024 operation, which itself drew global attention for its volatile and unprecedented character. The prospects of a strike, whether carried out jointly by the United States and its Zionist ally, Israel, or by either party alone, remains plausible, largely because the earlier offensive failed to achieve its main goals, namely removing Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and dismantling Iran's nuclear infrastructure. It is precisely this dual failure that has prompted Trump and his pro-Israeli allies to float the idea of a renewed military operation. Washington has set out 3 conditions: a permanent end to Iran's uranium enrichment, tighter limits on its ballistic missile program, and the cessation of Tehran's support for allied regional groups. Even though Iran has entered negotiations over its nuclear activities, it has shown no willingness to abandon the program altogether. As U.S. forces draw closer to Iranian waters, the international community watches anxiously. China, for its part, has urged the United States to refrain from military escalation.
The use of force cannot solve the problems. Any military adventurism will only plunge the region into an abyss of unpredictability. China hopes that the United States and other relevant parties will heed the call made by the international community and the countries of the region.
Turkey, for its part, has offered to mediate between Iran and the United States, as the Iranian and American positions seem to be irreconcilable.
The European Union has approved new sanctions on Iran. Foreign ministers agreed Thursday to target individuals and entities for suppressing protesters and aiding Russia. Reuters reports the ministers are also expected to politically agree to label Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. This marks a symbolic shift in Europe's stance toward Tehran's leadership. Tehran has slammed the European Union's move to label Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization, calling it a serious strategic mistake. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Thursday on X platform that while many countries are working to prevent a full-scale war in the region, Europe is instead stoking tensions. He added that Europe's push to activate the US-backed snapback mechanism makes the decision even more reckless. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Navy plans live fire exercises in the Strait of Hormuz next week. State media reports that drills are scheduled for February 1st and 2nd. This follows other recent military exercises by the Guard, including missile defense drills in several major cities earlier this month. Moving on to the war in Sudan, several civilians were killed and more injured in RSF shelling in Deleng, Sudan's second largest city in South Kordofan. Local media reported Thursday that an intense RSF bombardment hit western neighborhoods, killing 6, including 3 children, and wounding 13 others. The Sudanese army says it has secured full control of Deleng in South Kordofan, stabilizing all fronts in the region. Kordofan's sector official for the Sudan Liberation Movement, allied with the army, told All 24 News TV on Thursday that forces are advancing on multiple fronts and will continue operations until the region is fully liberated. The EU and the UK have announced new sanctions against senior RSF leaders over the fall of El Fasher and reports of ethnic killings and systematic sexual violence. Sanctions target the brother of RSF commander Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, 6 other RSF members, and field commander Ali Fatah Abdullah Idris, known as Abu Lulu, after videos showed him executing unarmed civilians. Reports say over 2,000 people were killed during the RSF's October 2025 takeover of the city. Looking Eastern Europe, a top Kremlin advisor says disputed territory is not the only obstacle to a potential deal to end the war in Ukraine. Foreign policy advisor Yuri Shakov made the statement on Thursday. When asked if the territorial issue was the sole sticking point, Shakov said he did not believe so. He did not disclose what the other unresolved issues are. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Thursday he is unaware of the U.S.-Ukraine security guarantees and questioned their ability to secure lasting peace. Speaking at the Kremlin, Lavrov claimed Kiev is using the guarantees to threaten Russia and expressed doubt they would provide reliable stability in the region. And now it is time to catch up on more international news in the News in Brief with Nabil Khazini.
Truck drivers across the Western Balkans continued to block cargo terminals at borders with the European Union on Thursday, as regional governments urged Brussels to revise rules they say are driving up costs by hundreds of millions of euros. The protests, which began on Monday, involved drivers in Bosnia, Montenegro, North Macedonia and Serbia, opposing the EU's stricter enforcement of its entry-exit system. Under the measures, drivers risk detention and deportation if they exceed Schengen stay limits. Long queues stretched outside a gas station in the West Bank city of El Khalil on Thursday, as residents struggled to obtain cooking gas amid a shortage that officials and locals say has persisted since December, deepening daily hardship for families. Residents said the winter shortage has left many unable to cook meals or heat their homes during cold weather, as demand surged and supplies from occupation companies were cut, forcing people to wait for hours in freezing conditions for limited fuel. A twin-propeller aircraft carrying 15 people, including a Colombian lawmaker, has crashed in a mountainous region. Authorities in Bogota confirmed. The flight, operated by Colombian state airline Satina, departed from Cúcuta and lost contact with air traffic control shortly before it was scheduled to land in Ocana around noon. All 13 passengers and 2 crew members on board were killed. The flight was a short domestic route scheduled to take just 23 minutes. Rescue teams are working in the remote crash area as investigations begin. Overnight attacks hit southeastern Ukraine. Local authorities reported that Russian forces struck the city of Zaporizhia, injuring 6 people, one of whom remains hospitalized. Ukraine's Air Force said the attack involved a ballistic missile and 146 strike drones, of which 103 were intercepted or destroyed. Damage to the city is still being assessed as officials continue emergency operations.
And that's the end of our news program. Thank you for tuning in. Good night.